as India started getting into lockdown, I would say that there were two phases. One, there was just rampant information, right, about how it can spread, how vicious is the disease, should you take it seriously or not. So one, there was this whole paucity of information and a lot of, I would say, half-baked information. And then there were specific state responses, national responses, etc., right, that one was starting to think about. I think in terms of people eating out, the response was fairly quick, right? Things just shut down, right? So there was no question about how to react there. And then there was the delivery business, right? And the minute that became declared as an essential service, you saw that nobody was really ordering because of, consumer delight or wanting to eat sushi or wanting to eat Chinese food, but really saying, listen, I'm sick. I can't cook because I am COVID positive or somebody is COVID positive. So it kind of became this essential service. And then we started thinking about, okay, how do we protect people who are sick? How do we still do a service? And how do you protect delivery partners as well, right, who are delivering this food? And that led to a bunch of very, very quick responses, both from trying to get restaurants to think about every aspect of the spread, trying to protect food, trying to deliver in a contactless way, as well as then witnessing what was happening around us, right, in terms of migrant workers heading back, and therefore how does Feeding India start also, that wheel start working. So it was I think 4 weeks of phenomenal change, Dushyant. Every time I sit back, there are new things that I remember and new things that I think one did right. But I think what really stands out to me is that, and very in a very hopeful, gratifying way, right, when that human beings are put to the test, I think most people do the right thing. Yeah, at least I think I was witness to that, and it was phenomenally worrying, but it was also quite rewarding to watch this company channelize technology, channelize communication, channelize just people across the world, and really build, not to use this word lightly, but build trust and make it work, right? And I don't want to go on about it. I'll answer specific things as you see is relevant. But I think if I had to encapsulate the moment, I think that would be it, Dushyant.
I'm just curious. Did Zomato at any point consider shutting down also? Even was that even on the table?
No, I don't think that was ever on the table, to be honest, right? Because very quickly it was sort of named an essential service. It was really thinking about how can one operate in each state, because there was a lot of confusion at that point between the center and the states, right? Certain states were seeing surges, certain states were being proactive, certain states were taking a wait and watch approach, but everybody normalized towards that lockdown period fairly quickly. But after that, there was a lot of initial confusion between what was allowed, what was not allowed, and so on. So I think the business definitely constricted, but it was, I think shutting down was absolutely never an option.
Never an option. All right. And I'm sure even communicating with the delivery staff and telling them to ply on the streets and go to people's homes, and I mean it's a personal service at the end of the day, and there's a curfew in place. I mean, I'm not curfew. I'm using the word curfew broadly, but was that how did that happen? Was there any resistance?
No, I think that first was, I think everybody was scared, right? Whether it was you or me or a delivery person, riding his or her two-wheeler, everybody was scared, right? A lot of people were also going back home, right? So simply to understand, okay, where was there enough supply of delivery partners, I think was one important assessment. The second part, I think, was definitely to also look at the restaurants themselves, Dushyant, lots of restaurants were shutting down, right? Because typically a restaurant does not have working capital beyond 30, 45 days, right? So how do you actually figure out the economics? And typically in a restaurant, it's at that point one was open only for lunch, right? Because one could not deliver dinner, right? So typically dinner becomes the big portion of a lot of restaurants. It's the most valuable meal, right? So you were trying to figure out a one meal model from a restaurant's perspective. You were trying to survive as a restaurant, and typically dining in was not allowed, booze was not allowed. Again, that's the largest margin from a business perspective. So they had really constricted to delivering meals. The delivery business had constricted to delivering that one or two meals, given all the constraints placed on delivery, as well as at that point, if you remember, there were lots of zones as well, right, where one could not
Red,
go in,
green.
etc., etc.
Yeah.
So there was, I mean, it was a lot of, I would say, you have an operation that's running, you start seeing pressure being applied in different parts of the operation, and then you start solving for each of those pressure points, right? Then if you see a trend, you put something in place saying, listen, these are the kinds of protection we can offer. This is what we can tell you in terms of who you're delivering to and who is delivering to you. And this is what we can tell you in terms of supply. So I think broad-based transparency became a very, very important thing, right? Purely out of necessity. So every part of the journey, every little bit of information about the restaurant, everything the restaurant could tell the business, everything the business could tell the consumer, the delivery partner, the restaurant. I think every channel was, it was fully on, right? In multiple languages. So it was, I would say, a lot of communication. It was a lot of in-app communication, email communication, WhatsApp communication. Overdrive, in terms of just really dotting the I's and crossing the T's.
So, and on one hand, there is Zomato, which is essentially a food delivery service. At some point, you guys also started delivering groceries and other stuff. So Zomato has food at the center of its business, and on the other hand, you have tremendous. For most people, astonishing hunger across the country. And can you tell us a bit about how the Feeding India came about and how that
Yeah, sure.
also.
Sure. So I think, here it's currently, because I'm not a part of the organization, it's hard for me to speak for them. But having said that, I know Dipinder well enough and over a long period of time. I think in a very simple way, the company has always been aware of the the very, very obvious inequality around us, right? You're making a lot of very, very varied consumer choices, but there is a world around us where nobody has any choice, right? So I think the fact that whether initially through Akshay Patra, then Robin Hood Army, which was also set up by one of the Zoman while he was at Zomato, and then later the Feeding India operation as well, this has been on for in some form or the other for the last 3-4 years, right? And I think what happened during this particular moment was, I think, twofold, right? One was, how can we raise the maximum amount of money? And I think there again, completely overwhelmed by the way both users as well as people who support the entire ecosystem, including VCs, right? The way they responded in actually donating so that one might, we realized very quickly that meals were not going to help, right? We knew that we had to give grains. We knew we had to give a certain ration of supply that would provide stability for a week, right? Whether you were quarantined, whether you were away, whether you were sitting in a makeshift camp, whatever it was, right? So the entire operation sort of realigned to start looking at a certain mix of dal, rice, flour, some vegetables, so on and so forth. And to make that as widely available as possible, right? So and there again, lots of partners. So I would say one part was the fundraising. The other part was defining what it is that we could deliver to vulnerable sections so that they might be supported for the longest period of time? And then where could we get that supply from in the quickest possible time, in the cheapest possible way, and then deliver it in the safest possible way? So I think it all happened, parts of it happened sequentially, but I think it came together pretty fast and the scale expanded very, very fast. So I think, in Zomato, when it expanded to about 500 plus cities, right, across this country, it was pretty fascinating again to watch how quickly one could get, onboard delivery people, right? So that was one trend, right? The ability to be able to have some mode of transport, right? Whether a cycle or a two-wheeler, or in some cases, I think women in certain parts also drove scooters, so on and so forth, right? So very quickly, people started getting into this business of delivery, and more so with even e-commerce, so on and so forth. So delivery, I think, as a function is there, right? Now, within that, there is a lot of movement, right? So today, an Amazon delivery partner could become Flipkart. Somebody who's doing half a day for one can do half a day for another. There's a lot of movement around, right? So I would say that as long as e-commerce is seeing the kind of growth that we are witnessing currently, right? And when I see Amazon and Flipkart, especially the horizontal firms, which are less susceptible to a single industry's risk, you are seeing the quantum of delivery is not going down, right? The quantum of delivery is only going up. I think the risks are obviously in this whole sort of segment of people choosing to become, so how do companies start supporting them in a more, I think, structural way is definitely a question that companies must answer. But I think gig economy workers need also to answer, in terms of, there's a lot of churn, right? There's a lot of logging in, logging off. Like when you actually look at the mechanics of it, oftentimes a lot of the gig economy participants like to have the choice of working for 4 or 5 companies, right? They do not want to only work for a single company, right? So I think both things have to be kept in mind. Has the gig economy, in terms of people participating in it in the major 15 to 20 cities, I think, has it been hit? It definitely has, because people have moved back to smaller cities. But I think you'll start seeing those cities grow in some form of commerce or the other, even if it might not be food or fashion, it could be a bunch of other things, right? So I think that those who made the shift to delivery will likely remain in some form of delivery. And I think that segment of jobs will only grow, Osama. But I think it needs to be structured. It needs to be supported more. I think there needs to be a lot of education on what are the benefits that need to be available and how those benefits should be structured.